cannot love Madeleine more than I love her. You know, I would never have taken a risk. It was something that wasn't even a decision. That's how safe it felt, you know.
What
And it didn't
information
help.
did we have to suggest it wasn't going to be safe? We were dining 50 yards away. We were making regular checks. We were going into the apartment, always quiet, every night. And if we had thought it was unsafe for a minute, if there was any conscious element that somebody was going to go into that apartment and steal your child, then of course we wouldn't have done that.
But it wasn't just a matter of being unsafe, was it? I mean, is it the case? You can clear it up right here now. Was Madeleine upset the night before about being left alone? Had she had a moment, got out of bed, started crying and started looking for you?
I mean, I don't want to dwell on it too much. I mean, I don't know if you saw the documentary last night, so I mean, I have talked about it. Madeleine made a comment in passing that, where were you when I cried? Not just to Mummy, by the way, just generally. And it just seemed a bit odd. I mean, it was a very kind of passing remark, and we just thought she doesn't usually wake up, and she woke up, that means that, you know, she must have fallen back asleep very quickly. And then she moved on. You know, she moved on.
Anybody with young children will understand that children cry, they wake up at night. During that week, there was one night, and we can't give too much detail because it's part of the investigation file, but there was one night where Madeleine had come through and one of the other twins was crying. So, you know, and when she did mention it to us and we asked her about it, and she just dropped, she was completely fine. And we thought, was it when they were bathing, getting them, you know, first putting them down in that period when they're really tired? Of course, with hindsight, in the context of what happened, of Madeleine being abducted, it's put in a very different light, and it's put in a very different light to us, and of course we emphasise that.
If Madeleine hadn't been abducted, we'd never have thought of that comment again.
Words cannot describe the anguish and despair that we are feeling.
On May 3, 2007, in Praia da Luz, Portugal, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann shocked the world. But it was not just the vanishing of a child that ignited controversy. It was the contradictions in her parents' behavior, Kate and Gerry McCann, that turned a tragedy into a maze of suspicion. Kate screamed of abduction. Gerry collapsed in tears, yet their actions raised questions. Washing Madeleine's toy cuddle cat, refusing to answer 48 police questions, and delaying the call to authorities. Were they grieving parents or the ones hiding a crime? With the open windows, conflicting testimony, and the mysterious smell of death, the theory that Kate and Gerry were the killers, covering up Madeleine's death, becomes a chilling prism. Step into the night of May 3, 2007, where every moment reveals signs that cast doubt on her very parents. At 7 p.m. on May 3, 2007, at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, Kate and Gerry McCann put their 3 children to bed in apartment 5A. Madeleine, just 3 years old, wore a pink and white pajama set featuring Eeyore. She clutched her cuddle cat and blanket in the main bedroom, while her twin siblings, Sean and Amelie, slept nearby. The front door was locked, but the sliding patio door was left open on purpose. According to the McCanns, this was done for easier access during routine checks. To some observers, this was negligence. To others, it was something more disturbing, the beginning of a cover-up. Kate and Gerry were both experienced doctors from Rothley, Leicestershire. As medical professionals, they understood risk. Despite this, they left 3 small children alone in a foreign apartment with an unlocked door, even after Madeleine had previously woken up in the night and asked, "Why didn't you come when me and Sean were crying?" This history of vulnerability makes their decision that night hard to explain. Many people wonder how 2 intelligent adults could justify such behavior. One theory is that they had become desensitized after repeating the same routine for almost 2 weeks. Another theory suggests something more serious. If Madeleine had already died before 7 p.m., perhaps due to an overdose of sedatives, then the open door could have been part of a staged scene to support a kidnapping story. There is evidence that supports this darker theory. Kate McCann had access to injectable sedatives, and reports confirmed that she possessed multiple vials, some of which were empty. These were said to be for personal use, but their presence raises questions. If Madeleine was given medication to help her sleep and died accidentally, the open door could serve 2 purposes: to suggest an intruder and to provide a route for removing the body unnoticed. Adding to the suspicion is the tension in the McCann's marriage. Kate reportedly suspected Jerry of having an affair and even bought a spy pen to monitor him. If the couple was distracted or emotionally strained, it might explain a lapse in judgment. But if a tragic accident had already occurred, it could also explain how and why they may have begun to create a false narrative. If Madleen was dead by 7 p.m., every decision made afterward takes on new meaning. Leaving the patio door open would not just be about convenience. It would be a calculated detail in a larger story. An open door suggests an easy entrance and supports the idea of an abduction. If someone needed to remove a body discreetly, that door was the logical choice. It would leave no broken locks or forced entry. Just an open door and a missing child. This possibility makes the McCann's behavior even more unsettling. They appeared relaxed and cheerful in the hours before the disappearance. To some, this showed innocence. To others, it suggested they were putting on a performance. Their calm attitude, in hindsight, could be seen as emotional distancing. It could have been a way to prepare for what came next. These are not proven facts. But the contradictions are difficult to ignore. Why did they continue leaving the children unsupervised without any monitoring equipment? Why take such risks for a dinner only 55 meters away? Some argue that there are innocent explanations. But these explanations struggle under the weight of so many strange details. If Madleen had already died, the bedroom may have been arranged to appear untouched. Her body might have already been removed, and the rest of the scene left as part of the story. The image of Madleen asleep with her cuddle cat has become a symbol of innocence. But in this context, it is deeply ironic. That room may not have been safe. It may have been staged. Later, Kate washed Cuddle Cat, an action many found odd. Cadaver dogs later detected the scent of a dead body on the toy. What was once a tender object may now be a clue in a disturbing mystery. This hour, from 7 to 8 p.m., may have been the most important in the entire case. It could have marked the beginning of a crime, or the start of its concealment. If Madleen had already died, everything that followed may have been part of a plan. The open patio door may not simply represent poor judgment. It may be a sign. Was it an innocent mistake, or was it the first scene in a carefully constructed deception? We may never know for sure. But this early decision, leaving a door unlocked and children alone, is enough to make us question the entire narrative. If Kate and Jerry McCann were innocent, their actions were reckless. If they were not, then 7 p.m. was not the beginning of a nightmare. It was the beginning of a cover-up. At 8:30 p.m. on May 3, 2007, Kate and Jerry McCann left apartment 5A at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz to join their friends, known as the Tapas 7, for dinner at the nearby tapas restaurant. The restaurant was approximately 55 meters away. They chose a table near the window, which they claimed allowed them to monitor the apartment. More notably, a request to reserve this specific table was written in the restaurant's booking log. The note explained that the McCann's children were alone in the apartment, a fact that, once public, raised eyebrows and questions. The booking log effectively advertised that apartment 5A had no adult supervision. Some interpreted this as an honest, albeit careless, detail. Others considered the possibility that it was a deliberate attempt to plant the idea of vulnerability, suggesting that the apartment could be an easy target for an intruder. Whether intentional or not, this note became one of the most debated aspects of the case. While dining, Kate and Jerry appeared relaxed. Witnesses described them laughing, drinking wine, and engaging in casual conversation. To many observers, this behavior was troubling. Their children, all under the age of 4, were alone in a ground floor apartment with an unlocked patio door. The notion that any parent would enjoy a carefree dinner under such conditions seemed implausible. To some, it appeared negligent. To others, it seemed rehearsed. Adding to the suspicion was their supposed effort to keep the apartment in sight. In reality, apartment 5A was not visible from their table. Trees, walls, and the general layout of the resort obstructed the view. The idea that they were watching the apartment was, at best, self-deception. At worst, It was part of a carefully built narrative to imply vigilance where there was none. The group implemented a system of checks, supposedly rotating every 25 to 30 minutes. However, the timing and thoroughness of these checks remain unclear. Later statements from members of the group varied, and inconsistencies in their accounts led to widespread confusion and doubt. Why did the McCanns choose not to use the Ocean Club's babysitting services, which were readily available? This question lingers. Some suggest they preferred privacy. Others believe it was a way to control the environment. But if Madleen had already died, the absence of a babysitter ensured no third-party witness could contradict their version of events. Several theories have emerged about the true nature of this dinner. One suggests that Kate and Jerry were simply overconfident, assuming their routine was safe. Another proposes that the dinner was a calculated effort to establish an alibi, providing witnesses to their public presence and framing the timeline around the supposed abduction. If Madleen had died earlier that evening, possibly due to a fall or the effects of sedation, the dinner could have served as the first act in a longer performance. Smiling, eating, and behaving normally would be necessary to maintain the illusion of ignorance. It would be a way to distance themselves emotionally and visually from the incident in the apartment. There is also the theory that the McCanns were still deciding what to do. In that scenario, they may have known something was wrong but were unsure how to respond. The relaxed demeanor could then be interpreted not as comfort, but as shock or denial. Or perhaps it was an effort to gauge reactions, to see how far they could go before raising alarm. Emotionally, the contrast between the scene at the dinner table and the potential tragedy unfolding in apartment 5A is stark. If Madleen was already dead, the laughter and wine become not signs of innocence, but symbols of detachment. It is this contrast that makes so many people uneasy. The thought that a child's death could be followed by a cheerful social gathering is difficult to process. From a psychological perspective, the McCanns' behavior may point to a form of compartmentalization. This is a defense mechanism where individuals separate themselves from traumatic or troubling events in order to function. If they were involved in or aware of Madeleen's fate, this behavior could be interpreted as an attempt to suppress guilt and avoid detection. The note in the reservation book, the choice of table, the refusal to use a babysitter, and the apparent calm at dinner all contribute to the growing suspicion surrounding this hour. What appears to be a normal family outing begins to feel like something else entirely. It becomes the potential staging ground for a story that would capture global attention. This part of the timeline, from 8:30 p.m. onward, cannot be viewed in isolation. Every decision made at the table, every glass of wine poured, every shared joke among friends now carries weight. If Madeleen's disappearance was accidental, then this dinner was a reckless misstep. But if it was part of a cover-up, then it was the opening act in a long, calculated performance. The evening air in Praia da Luz may have felt ordinary to those gathered around the tapas restaurant table. But under the surface, something much darker may have already taken root. The dinner, far from being a simple meal among friends, may have been the moment when reality began to split into two versions. One was public and filled with concern. The other was private and shrouded in secrets. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann left the dinner table at the tapas restaurant to check on his children in apartment 5A. This check was part of the group's agreed system of taking turns monitoring the sleeping children. When Jerry entered the apartment, he found the door to the children's bedroom open wider than expected. According to his later statement, he saw all three children in bed, including Madleen, who appeared to be asleep. He did not turn on the light, did not approach the bed closely, and did not check the window or the shutters. After a brief glance, he pulled the door nearly closed and returned to the restaurant. This moment is one of the most debated in the timeline. Jerry's actions seem oddly casual, especially considering the circumstances. As a cardiologist, trained in observing detail and recognizing signs of distress, his decision not to check thoroughly appears inconsistent with his professional mindset. The open bedroom door was abnormal. Madleen had recently asked why her parents had not come when she and her brother were crying the night before. That alone should have made Jerry more cautious. Why did Jerry not inspect the room more carefully? Why did he not ensure the children were all safely in bed or check the window, which would later become a key part of the abduction narrative? These questions remain central to suspicions about what really happened that night. Several possible explanations have been proposed. One theory is that Jerry's check was simply negligent. He may have assumed nothing was wrong and did the bare minimum before returning to dinner. Another possibility is more sinister. If Madleen had already died earlier that evening, Jerry's visit to the apartment may have been part of a staged timeline. A quick check, without lights or verification, would allow him to maintain the illusion that everything was fine. If Madeleen's death had occurred earlier, possibly due to sedation or an accident, then Jerry's role in this moment could have been deliberate. By entering the apartment and claiming to see her asleep, he effectively built the narrative that she was alive at 9:05 p.m. This would shift suspicion away from any incident happening before that time and help solidify the later claim of a kidnapping. The open bedroom door is a key detail. It could have been left ajar on purpose, either as part of a setup or because someone had recently exited the room. Jerry's failure to investigate this abnormality weakens his claim of being a vigilant parent. If Madleen was already dead, the open door could have been a carefully crafted clue meant to imply outside intrusion. There is also the possibility of subconscious avoidance. If Jerry suspected or knew that something had happened to Madleen, his minimal check may reflect a psychological desire not to confront the reality. This kind of denial or emotional detachment can occur in moments of trauma. However, it can also be interpreted as a tactic to maintain distance and protect a planned story. From a behavioral standpoint, Jerry's return to the dinner table is striking. He reportedly appeared calm and gave no indication that anything was wrong. He resumed eating and chatting with friends. If he had just seen a scene that raised concerns, an open door, a vulnerable child, one would expect some level of anxiety. Instead, his demeanor remained relaxed. This calmness, if Madleen was already dead, is deeply disturbing. It suggests a capacity for emotional control under pressure. It also suggests that the narrative was already in motion and that deviations from the plan would jeopardize it. The impact of this check reaches beyond just Jerry's actions. It anchors the entire timeline. If Madleen was seen alive at 9:05 p.m., then any disappearance must have occurred afterward. But if that sighting was false, then the actual timeline is pushed earlier, possibly before the McCanns even arrived at dinner. Every case detail is influenced by this moment. If Jerry lied, it changes everything. If he told the truth but missed signs of trouble, it suggests critical negligence. Either way, the 9:05 check becomes a turning point. Emotionally, the image of Jerry standing in that dimly lit room is haunting. If Madleen was alive, then his failure to ensure her safety is heartbreaking. If she was dead, then his ability to walk away and act normally is chilling. This is the crossroads where the line between accident and deception becomes blurred. The events of 9:05 p.m. remain uncertain. But what is clear is that Jerry's actions, whether careless or calculated, helped shape the story that would follow. His check, or lack thereof, became the last time anyone claimed to see Madleen alive. That fact alone makes it one of the most critical and controversial minutes in the entire investigation. At 9:15 p.m., Jane Tanner, a member of the Tappas 7 and a friend of the McCanns, left the dinner table to check on her own children. While walking along the path outside apartment 5A, she reported seeing a man carrying a small child dressed in light, colored pajamas. The man was walking away from the apartment, heading east. Jane did not raise the alarm or report this sighting immediately. She only mentioned it later, after news of Madeleen's disappearance became public. The timing of this sighting placed it just minutes after Jerry's check at 9:05 p.m., making it one of the most debated pieces of testimony in the case. Jane described the child as being barefoot and wearing light pajamas, similar to what Madleen was last seen wearing. Yet, despite the gravity of what she claimed to witness, she remained silent for a critical window of time. This delay raises serious questions. Why did Jane not raise an alert right away? Why would a man be carrying a young child through the dark streets of Praia da Luz at that hour? And more importantly, why did her sighting only become central after the narrative of abduction had been introduced by the McCanns? Several theories attempt to explain Jane Tanner's behavior. One possibility is that she was manipulated. If Kate and Jerry had already started spreading the idea of a kidnapping, Jane might have interpreted what she saw through that lens. Her recollection could have been shaped by suggestion, reinforced by the emotional chaos unfolding around her. Another theory suggests complicity. If Jane had prior knowledge of the events that evening, she may have purposefully introduced a vague sighting to support the abduction theory. Her description of the man and child was later dismissed by investigators, who identified the individual as a tourist carrying his own daughter from a nearby night care facility. Still, the damage was done. Her testimony gave early weight to the kidnapping narrative. A third theory argues that Jane's memory was distorted by group dynamics. Under pressure, surrounded by friends and emotional turmoil, she may have wanted to be helpful or simply found herself swept into the story. Her failure to act immediately may not have been malicious, but it certainly weakened the credibility of her account. From a psychological standpoint, Jane's inaction suggests either naivety or an internal conflict. If she truly believed she had seen something suspicious, her silence is troubling. If she was unsure or manipulated, it reveals how easily a narrative can be influenced by suggestion. The McCann's version of events became dominant quickly. Anyone within their circle could have been affected by that framing. Emotionally, this moment feels like a missed opportunity. If the sighting was real and involved an actual abductor, Jane's hesitation allowed a critical window of escape. If the sighting was false or fabricated, it added unnecessary confusion to an already complex case. Either way, it played directly into the evolving story that Madleen had been taken by a stranger. Jane's credibility has been questioned over the years. Some believe she was simply trying to be helpful in hindsight. Others point out that her description was oddly convenient and lacked detail. No other witness that night saw the same man. No surveillance footage, no follow-up witness, and no physical evidence supported her version. The fact that the police eventually dismissed the sighting reinforces doubts. Still, the question lingers: was Jane used as part of a coordinated effort to build a cover story, or was she an unknowing participant in a psychological spiral created by panic and guilt? If Kate and Jerry were involved in Madelein's death, the timing of Jane's sighting fits conveniently into a crafted timeline. Jerry's check at 9:05 p.m. established Madleen as alive. Jane's sighting at 9:15 p.m. introduced a supposed abductor. These two moments effectively locked in the narrative that Madleen disappeared between those times. If both were untrue, they collectively shifted the timeline away from the real moment of crisis. The image of a barefoot child being carried into the night is haunting. It speaks to vulnerability, innocence, and loss. But if that image was a product of suggestion or strategy, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a symbol of manipulation, a device used to direct the world's attention away from what may have actually happened inside apartment 5A. The events of 9:15 p.m. remain murky. Jane Tanner's silence, her vague description, and the later discrediting of her sighting have left a lasting shadow over the investigation. Whether she was deceived or deceiving, her role in the night's timeline cannot be ignored. In a case filled with uncertainty, Jane's moment on the path could have been a breakthrough or a diversion. The truth remains buried, but her testimony continues to shape the public's understanding of what happened on the night Madeleine McCann disappeared. At 9:30 p.m., Matthew Oldfield, another member of the Tapas 7, volunteered to check on the McCann children while checking on his own. He entered apartment 5A through the unlocked patio door. Upon reaching the children's bedroom, he noticed the door was open wider than he expected. He did not hear any sounds, He did not switch on the lights. Most notably, he did not look directly at the beds to confirm Madeleine's presence. He later admitted he could not recall the state of the window or whether Madeleine was actually in her bed. This check is often described as superficial and has been criticized as a failure of basic responsibility. With the recent memory of Madeleine crying the night before, one might expect any adult to perform a more thorough inspection. Instead, Matthew conducted what appeared to be a perfunctory glance, then returned to the restaurant and assured the group that everything seemed fine. There are several reasons why this check has attracted so much scrutiny. First, it represented the last potential opportunity to confirm Madeleine's well-being before she was reported missing. Second, Matthew's vague recollections have left crucial gaps in the timeline. Third, the lack of detailed observation raises the possibility that this check was not just careless, but calculated. One theory suggests that Matthew may have been instructed, directly or indirectly, to perform a quick check that would avoid the discovery of anything suspicious. If Madeleine had already died before 9:30 p.m., perhaps due to a sedative overdose or an accident, then a brief, unobservant visit would ensure that her absence or condition was not detected. In this version of events, Matthew's role becomes one of unwitting or willing complicity. Another possibility is that Kate and Jerry McCann, knowing what had happened, used their influence over the group to shape how others would interact with the apartment. If they created a sense of false normalcy and discouraged deeper concern, Matthew's casual approach might reflect group dynamics rather than individual intent. He may have felt that his responsibility was minimal, or that his task was only symbolic. A third hypothesis is that Matthew's vague account served a strategic purpose in the developing timeline. His confirmation that everything appeared fine at 9:30 p.m. helped anchor the window of abduction to the narrow period between 9:30 and 10 p.m. This helped reinforce the idea that Madeleine was taken by an intruder during a brief gap when no adult was checking. There is also the matter of the open bedroom door. Jane Tanner reported that it was open at 9:15 p.m. Jerry said it was slightly ajar at 9:05 p.m. By 9:30 p.m., Matthew claimed it was open wider than expected. These small details raise big questions. If someone had entered or exited through the window by then, why didn't Matthew notice? If the curtains were disturbed or the window opened, that should have raised alarm. His inability to recall the state of the window only deepens the mystery. Psychologically, Matthew's behavior can be interpreted in different ways. If he was unaware of any wrongdoing, his negligence speaks to a false sense of security and reliance on group assumptions. If he was aware of a deeper problem, his passive check could be seen as an effort to distance himself from the situation without interfering. The emotional weight of this moment is significant. If Madeleine's body was already gone or hidden, then Matthew's silent visit to the room takes on a haunting quality. He may have been just a few feet away from the truth and failed to act. If he was part of a coordinated effort, however reluctant, then his action was not merely an oversight, but a reinforcement of a false narrative. This check also serves as a key moment in the public timeline. It provided the McCanns with another layer of perceived normalcy. It gave the appearance that multiple adults were actively involved in caring for the children, and that Madeleine was last seen well after Jerry's 9:05 check. If Matthew had discovered Madeleine missing at 9:30 p.m., the official story would have changed drastically. Ultimately, Matthew's check at 9:30 p.m. is remembered less for what it revealed than for what it missed. His vague memory and lack of detail have led many to question the sincerity and effectiveness of the group's monitoring system. Whether careless or complicit, Matthew's role at this moment is critical. The image of him standing in that dark, quiet room, possibly steps from where Madeleine once lay, lingers as one of the most unsettling scenes in the case. If he unknowingly missed a chance to intervene, it is a tragic lapse. If he knowingly avoided the truth, it is a cold betrayal of trust. Either way, his actions at 9:30 p.m. remain a pivotal and deeply troubling part of the Madeleine McCann mystery. At 10 p.m., Kate McCann left the tapas restaurant and returned to apartment 5EA for her turn to check on the children. What happened next became the defining moment of the entire case. Upon entering the apartment, she found the children's bedroom door wide open. The window was open, and the external shutter was raised. Madleen was gone. Only Cuddle Cat and her pink blanket remained on the bed. Kate ran back to the restaurant and screamed, "They've taken her?" Her cry shattered the quiet night in Praia da Luz and launched one of the most publicized missing person cases in modern history. The immediate declaration of kidnapping raised questions from the outset. There were no signs of a break-in. The window was open, but there was no broken glass, no damage to the shutter, and no evidence of forced entry. Yet Kate's words framed the event not as a disappearance or a child wandering off, but as an abduction. Her instinctive response might have been genuine maternal panic, but to some, it felt rehearsed, almost too precise for a first reaction. Even more unsettling was Kate's decision to leave Sean and Amelie behind in the apartment while raising the alarm. In a moment of high fear, most parents would instinctively gather all their children. Kate did not. This choice could reflect desperation to act quickly, or it could suggest something else. A decision made under pressure to maintain control of the unfolding narrative. Meanwhile, around the same time, Martin Smith and his family were walking back to their apartment after dinner. On a street approximately 500 meters from the Ocean Club, they saw a man carrying a blonde girl in pajamas. The girl appeared to be about 4 years old, barefoot and asleep or unconscious. The man walked hurriedly, not speaking. What struck Martin Smith most was the posture. The child lay motionless against the man's shoulder. Weeks later, after seeing footage of Jerry McCann returning to the UK carrying his son in a similar position, Smith reported that the man they saw resembled Jerry. This sighting, now known as the Smith sighting, has become one of the most controversial elements in the case. It directly contradicts Jerry's stated location at the time and suggests that he may have been away from the Tapas group during a critical window. If Martin Smith's recollection is accurate, it would place Jerry near the beach, heading away from the apartment, carrying a child. At the same time Kate was raising the alarm. One major theory is that Madleen died earlier in the evening, possibly due to an accidental overdose of sedatives or a fatal fall. In this scenario, Kate and Jerry orchestrated a cover-up. The open window and the scream were part of the plan to establish the narrative of a kidnapping. Jerry's role would have been to discreetly remove Madelein's body, possibly to a temporary hiding place, such as a nearby church, while Kate initiated the public response. The detail that Kate possessed injectable sedatives, and that some vials were found empty, lends weight to this theory. Madeleine may have been given something to help her sleep, a dose miscalculated with tragic results. The panic that followed would not just be parental grief, but also a scramble to avoid legal consequences. A public story had to be constructed quickly and convincingly. Kate's scream has since been replayed in countless media reconstructions. Some believe it reflects raw maternal anguish. Others believe it was timed for maximum emotional impact. The lack of immediate evidence supporting a break-in adds to the suspicion. The window had not been touched from the outside, and the bed looked undisturbed. Jerry's behavior also came under scrutiny. He was seen crying on the shoulder of a friend, Paul Moyes. He appeared devastated. But if he was the man seen by the Smith family, his emotional display may have been a performance. The possibility that he had just disposed of his daughter's body and returned to the resort to participate in the search is chilling. Psychologically, the behavior of both parents during this period walks a fine line between trauma and control. Kate's vocal distress could be a genuine reaction or a projection of guilt. Her decision to scream about kidnapping rather than seek out Madeleine or search the apartment more thoroughly could reflect a desire to establish a narrative quickly. Emotionally, the image of a barefoot girl being carried through the streets of Praia da Luz is haunting. It speaks to the vulnerability of children and the fragile trust between appearance and reality. If the man was Jerry McCann, then what the Smiths witnessed was not a rescue or a crime in progress. it was a father's final act of concealment. There is also the matter of timing. If Kate discovered Madleen missing just before 10 p.m., and the Smith sighting occurred at nearly the same time, the synchronization becomes too precise to ignore. It raises the possibility that both events were coordinated. Kate's scream may have been delayed until Jerry returned, or confirmed that he was in position. The Smith sighting was initially underplayed in the investigation. Only years later did it resurface with stronger emphasis. The resemblance to Jerry McCann was never fully confirmed, and the Smith family themselves were hesitant to make a definitive identification. Still, their testimony remains one of the few independent observations outside the Tapas group. In the aftermath of Kate's scream, the Ocean Club erupted into chaos. Staff and guests began searching the resort. The police were called, but by the time they arrived, any chance of preserving the scene had passed. If Madelein's body had been moved, it was already gone. If evidence existed, it may have been trampled or lost in the confusion. This moment at 10 p.m. serves as the emotional and narrative turning point in the Madeleine McCann case. Whether Kate's scream was an instinctive cry of a terrified mother or the launch of a carefully constructed deception remains one of the central questions. The Smith sighting adds a chilling parallel, an image that could confirm the worst suspicions or be the result of tragic coincidence. In either case, the events of this minute changed everything. The story of a missing child became the story of a possible cover-up. A cry in the night echoed far beyond the walls of apartment 5A, leaving behind questions that still remain unanswered. Between 10:10 and 10:41 p.m., one of the most puzzling gaps in the Madeleine McCann timeline occurred. After Kate raised the alarm with her, now famous scream that, "They've taken her," Jerry McCann did not immediately call the police. Instead, he reportedly instructed Matthew Oldfield, a member of the Tapas 7, to notify the front desk. During this time, the group made 31 phone calls, none of which were to law enforcement. The official call to the Portuguese police, the GNR, was not logged until 10:41 p.m., more than 30 minutes after Madleen was discovered missing. This 31-minute window is highly controversial. In a moment of panic, most parents would instinctively contact emergency services. Jerry's choice to delegate this responsibility is baffling. Kate, though reportedly frantic, also did not make the call herself. Instead, the group appears to have spent this critical period calling family, friends, and possibly each other. Whether this was a chaotic response or a controlled effort remains at the heart of the suspicion surrounding their behavior. Critics of the McCanns view this delay as deeply suspicious. If the disappearance were genuine, why stall contacting the police? Why prioritize phone calls to people in the UK over securing help in Portugal? The volume of calls suggests something more than disarray. It suggests strategy, perhaps even orchestration. One theory is that the calls were used to align the narrative among the Tapas 7. If Madleen had died earlier that evening, as some suspect, this was the group's opportunity to agree on key timelines, behaviors, and what to say once the authorities arrived. The window between discovery and formal report offered a rare opportunity to rehearse a version of events. Another theory proposes that the delay provided time for Jerry to finalize the concealment of Madelein's body. If he was indeed the man seen by the Smith family shortly before 10 p.m., this pause may have been necessary to allow him to return and integrate himself into the search effort without appearing suspicious. By delaying the police call, he could re-establish his presence and avoid logistical contradictions. The fact that Kate and Jerry had access to sedatives, and that some vials were found empty, intensifies the belief that Madleen may have died from an accidental overdose. If so, the McCann's delay may also reflect a struggle between panic and pragmatism. A frantic effort to devise a plausible story while coping with the shock of loss and the fear of prosecution. The decision to have Oldfield report the disappearance is telling. Delegating this task distanced Jerry from direct interaction with the authorities during the critical early stage. If deliberate, it was a move to protect himself from scrutiny, limiting his exposure to official questioning until a unified front was established. Psychologically, this period reflects a moment of control cloaked in chaos. Kate's visible distress lent emotional urgency to the situation. Jerry's quiet, methodical behavior contrasted sharply with that. The contrast could be interpreted in two ways, one as a division of emotional roles in a crisis, the other as a performance designed to deflect suspicion. Emotionally, the 31-minute gap is agonizing. If Madleen had truly just been taken, this was the golden hour to alert police, secure the perimeter, and initiate a coordinated search. Every minute lost was a minute further from rescue. The fact that this time was spent on private phone calls, rather than immediate action, leaves a heavy emotional weight. Supporters of the McCanns argue that cultural confusion, panic, and shock might have caused the delay. They were in a foreign country. They were unfamiliar with emergency procedures. But this explanation falls short for many. Jerry and Kate were both trained medical professionals, accustomed to making decisions under pressure. The delay, to skeptics, is not the result of confusion. It is the result of calculation. When the police were finally called at 10:41 p.m., the window to preserve the scene had already closed. Guests had entered the apartment. Evidence had potentially been moved. If Madelein's disappearance was staged, this delay served its purpose. It allowed time to manipulate the scene, reinforce the abduction story, and avoid detection. This period between 10:10 and 10:41 p.m. remains one of the most frustrating chapters in the case. The absence of clear action, the strange priorities, and the reliance on private communication rather than emergency response has never been satisfactorily explained. Whether the McCanns were overwhelmed or orchestrating, this time gap undermined trust. From a narrative perspective, this is the moment where the story could have changed. A direct call to police, an immediate lockdown of the area, and a controlled preservation of the scene could have yielded answers. Instead, the confusion only deepened. The McCanns' decision to delay contact with police transformed the case from a tragedy into a mystery. It created a space where theories could thrive, where suspicion could take root, and where the question shifted from, who took Madleen, to, what really happened in those missing 31 minutes? At 10:41 p.m., the Portuguese police officially received the first alert about Madeleine McCann's disappearance. By then, nearly an hour had passed since Kate McCann first discovered that her daughter was missing. From that moment onward, the Ocean Club Resort was thrown into disarray. Resort staff, guests, and even passers-by joined in a frantic search that continued until 4:30 a.m. It was a chaotic effort involving flashlights, shouted names, and random searches of the beach, streets, and buildings. Yet, despite the involvement of around 60 people, there was no sign of Madleen. Kate was seen calling out her daughter's name again and again, reportedly devastated and desperate. Jerry appeared visibly shaken and quickly assumed a leadership role, helping coordinate with resort staff and guests. To many observers, this was the natural behavior of anguished parents. But to skeptics, their participation felt too deliberate, too controlled, especially in light of what would later come to light. Kate's later decision to wash Cuddle Cat, the stuffed toy Madleen slept with every night, has drawn serious suspicion. Cadaver dogs would later alert to the scent of death on the toy, suggesting it had come into contact with a dead body. Washing it in the hours following the disappearance raises the possibility that this was an attempt to destroy forensic evidence. Likewise, the presence of empty vials of sedatives among Kate's belongings suggests that medication could have played a role in Madelein's fate. These details cast a shadow over the night's events and the family's apparent desperation. If Kate and Jerry were guilty, their behavior during the search could be interpreted not as genuine panic, but as an effort to solidify their innocence. By appearing publicly emotional and deeply involved in the search effort, they insulated themselves from early suspicion. This would not be the first time in criminal history where perpetrators actively joined search efforts to deflect guilt. One theory holds that Madelein's body was moved well before the search began, possibly hidden in a location, such as a nearby church. This would explain why no physical trace of her was ever found during the initial search. The Smith sighting, which suggested Jerry may have been seen carrying a child around 10 p.m., supports this theory. If accurate, then by the time police and volunteers were combing the resort grounds, they were already searching in vain. Another theory links the use of sedatives to a fatal accident. Madleen may have been unintentionally overdosed and died earlier in the evening. If so, the search was not about finding a missing child, but about reinforcing a narrative of abduction. In that case, Kate's vocal grief and Jerry's strategic direction of the search become deeply manipulative actions, intended to mislead both witnesses and investigators. The Renault Scenic, which the McCanns rented several weeks later, would eventually become another point of suspicion. Dogs trained to detect cadaver scent would later alert to the trunk of that vehicle. It was reported that the car was driven more than 3,000 kilometers within just a few days. Though circumstantial, these facts lend support to the idea that Madelein's body may have been temporarily hidden and later moved with the car. The behavior of the police during the search also raises questions. Officers from the GNR were not trained in missing child investigations and reportedly lacked urgency in securing the scene. Apartment 5A was not immediately sealed off. Guests and volunteers walked through it freely, compromising potential evidence. If there had been signs of a struggle or physical clues to Madelein's fate, they may have been lost forever. The chaotic nature of the search worked in the McCanns' favor. If they were indeed hiding something, the lack of immediate structure, forensic procedures, and experienced investigation meant that the early hours were largely wasted. If Madelein's disappearance was staged, this chaos provided the perfect cover. Psychologically, the contrast between the public display of grief and the private actions of the McCanns fuels doubt. Kate's cries may have been heartfelt, or they may have been the result of pressure and guilt. Jerry's calm leadership may have been reassuring, or it may have been a means to stay in control of the narrative. In moments of true trauma, behavior is unpredictable, but the precision of their roles during those first hours continues to trouble investigators and observers alike. Emotionally, the image of a small town staying up all night, searching for a lost child, is deeply moving. It represents hope, solidarity, and humanity. But if that hope was based on a lie, the emotional cost is staggering. The idea that dozens of people were unknowingly participating in a performance orchestrated by the parents is painful to imagine. By 4:30 a.m., the search had turned up nothing. Madleen had vanished without a trace. There were no footprints, no clothing, no objects misplaced. Only confusion, desperation, and silence. The hours that followed would bring more questions than answers. This stretch of time, from 10:30 p.m. to 4:30 a.m., is marked by urgency on the surface and uncertainty beneath. It is a period where genuine hope and potential deception coexisted, where every shouted name and every opened door may have been in pursuit of a truth that had already been hidden. Whether the McCanns were truly searching for their daughter or simply for credibility, the emotional and investigative consequences of that night continue to echo to this day. In August 2007, the investigation into Madeleine McCann's disappearance took a dramatic turn. British sniffer dogs Eddie and Keela, highly trained to detect the scent of human decomposition and traces of blood, respectively, were brought to Praia da Luz. What they uncovered shook the foundation of the McCann's narrative. Eddie, the cadaver dog, alerted to the smell of death in several key locations. Behind the sofa and inside the wardrobe of apartment 5A, on Kate McCann's clothing, on the child's favorite toy cuddle cat, and in the trunk of a Renault Scenic rented by the McCanns 6 weeks after the disappearance. Keela, trained to detect human blood, also signaled the same apartment spot behind the sofa. These alerts painted a disturbing picture, one that aligned less with abduction and more with death occurring inside the apartment. Kate explained the cadaver scent on her clothes and cuddle cat by citing her profession as a doctor. She claimed she may have come into contact with dead bodies during her shifts. But critics, including the dog handlers themselves, pointed out that the dogs reacted only in areas directly connected to Madleen, not randomly. Neither dog signaled in unrelated spaces like rental homes or cars, used by other members of the investigation. This selective pattern bolstered the argument that Madleen had died inside apartment 5A. The Renault Scenic became another focal point. The McCanns had rented it weeks after the disappearance, ostensibly to aid in their search. However, both dogs alerted to the vehicle. More troubling still, forensic tests uncovered a DNA sample in the trunk. While the match was partial, it contained markers consistent with Madleen. The Portuguese police believed this discovery strongly supported the theory that her body had been moved using the car. Yet the evidence was not without complications. The sample was not pristine. It was mixed and possibly degraded. Critics pointed out that police had driven the Renault Scenic themselves to the testing facility, raising the possibility of contamination. This error diminished the legal weight of the DNA evidence, but didn't erase its disturbing implications. Why would any trace of Madeleen's DNA be in the trunk of a car rented long after her disappearance? Adding to the mystery was the car's mileage. In just 3 days, it was driven over 3,000 kilometers. Jerry and Kate explained this by saying they were searching for Madleen. But the exact nature of these trips remains vague. The timing of the rental, the scent alerts, and the DNA evidence combine to suggest that the Renault Scenic was possibly used to transport her remains. Multiple theories emerged. One held that Madleen died the night of May 3, possibly due to an accidental fall or a sedative overdose administered to ensure sleep while her parents dined out. The McCanns, panicking, may have temporarily hidden her body nearby, perhaps in the church they frequently visited. Weeks later, with police pressure mounting, they could have moved the body using the rented car. This would explain why the dogs alerted both in the apartment and the vehicle. Another possibility was that the abduction story had been fabricated from the outset. In this version, the open window and the frantic screams were part of a carefully constructed narrative meant to disguise an accidental death. The DNA in the car and the cadaver scent on personal belongings reflect not a crime of malice, but a cover uprooted in fear. From a psychological standpoint, Kate's explanation for the cadaver scent appeared desperate, an attempt to rationalize the irrational. Her subsequent refusal to answer police questions only deepened the impression of evasion. Jerry, on the other hand, continued to cooperate publicly, but rarely addressed the forensic findings directly. Their mixed responses suggest either a coordinated effort to deflect suspicion or an inability to face the full truth. Emotionally, the dog's alerts strike a devastating chord. That cuddle cat, the toy Madleen clung to every night, could carry the scent of death, transforms it from a symbol of innocence into a forensic clue. It challenges the heart as well as the mind. If Kate and Jerry knowingly handled their daughter's dead body, then washed the toy to erase evidence, the emotional betrayal is almost incomprehensible. The forensic findings in the McCann case remain controversial. Legally inconclusive yet emotionally and investigatively compelling, they exist in a space where science meets psychology. The cadaver dogs did not lie. The DNA was not invented. Whether the evidence amounts to legal proof is one question, but whether it tells a story is another. And in the case of Madeleine McCann, every clue, every scent, and every silence speaks volumes. Madeleine Beth McCann, a 3-year-old girl known for her bright spirit and love of swimming, vanished on the night of May 3, 2007. Her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, both medical professionals, projected the image of a stable, middle-class British family vacationing in Praia da Luz. But internal cracks were already forming. Kate had reportedly suspected Jerry of infidelity and purchased a spy pen to monitor him. This hint of mistrust, rarely discussed in public narratives, suggests a home dynamic fraught with tension, possibly affecting how events unfolded. What was framed as a relaxing getaway soon took on the shape of neglect. Each night, the McCanns left their children alone in apartment 5A, with the patio door intentionally left unlocked. Even more troubling, a restaurant booking note indicated their preference for a table with a view of the apartment, acknowledging the children were unattended. This wasn't mere carelessness. It may have served to build a narrative of accessibility, laying the groundwork for a future claim of abduction. When Kate discovered Madleen missing, she immediately screamed, "They've taken her," a declaration that presumes a kidnapping, before any evidence of forced entry was visible. This instinctive framing of the situation, combined with Jerry's decision to delegate the police call to a friend, while making 31 private calls beforehand, raises disturbing questions. Were they seeking help or coordinating stories? Kate's decision the next morning to wash Madelein's cuddle cat, the toy she slept with every night, adds another layer of suspicion. Cadaver dogs later alerted to the scent of death on that very toy. Her explanation, that it was simply dirty, loses credibility in light of this forensic detail. Similarly, empty sedative vials found among Kate's belongings raised concerns. As an anesthesiologist, her access and knowledge suggest she may have administered medication to help Madleen sleep. If so, the possibility of accidental overdose cannot be ignored. Perhaps the most psychologically revealing behavior was Kate's refusal to answer 48 key questions posed by Portuguese investigators. These weren't trick questions. They included simple ones such as, "Do you feel responsible for your daughter's disappearance?" Her silence, especially paired with public media appearances, felt incongruent and unsettling. In contrast, Jerry maintained a calm, composed image in media interviews and helped lead public-facing efforts. But this composed demeanor, so carefully curated, came off as strategic rather than emotional. Within days, the couple launched Madelein's fund, secured legal representation, and brought on PR professionals. For grieving parents, such swift mobilization could be interpreted either as proactive hope or calculated control. Adding to the contradictions, Kate continued to buy Christmas and birthday presents for Madleen years after her disappearance. Some saw this as a testament to maternal hope. Others interpreted it as performance, a way to sustain sympathy and the image of innocence. Taken together, these behaviors paint a portrait of deep psychological ambiguity. If innocent, the McCanns are parents navigating an unimaginable tragedy. If not, their actions reflect a chilling level of premeditation. From washing the toy touched by death, to public sobs juxtaposed with private silence, their story is less about certainty and more about doubt. Strategic, persistent, and unresolved. In September 2007, Kate and Jerry McCann were officially named as arguidos, formal suspects, by the Polícia Judiciária. This status stemmed largely from forensic alerts and inconsistencies in their statements. Kate's refusal to answer 48 police questions, including whether she was involved in Madelein's disappearance, only deepened suspicion. Yet less than a year later, in July 2008, the Portuguese authorities lifted their suspect status, citing insufficient evidence. The reversal left many puzzled. Despite the cadaver dog alerts, partial DNA matches, and the troubling timeline, the case seemingly stalled. Speculation grew that political pressure had influenced the outcome. Then, UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown's involvement, including direct contact with Portuguese officials and public support for the McCanns, was viewed by some as unusual. Critics argued that such high-level political interest in a single criminal case was unprecedented and potentially biased the investigation. In 2011, the British Metropolitan Police launched Operation Grange, re-examining the case from the beginning. It brought renewed attention and funding but offered no major breakthroughs. Then in 2020, the focus abruptly shifted to a new suspect, Christian Bruckner, a German convicted sex offender with a long criminal history in Portugal. Bruckner lived intermittently in the Algarve from the mid-1990s through 2007 and had a known pattern of burglary and assault. His history made him a plausible person of interest. However, no concrete evidence ever tied him directly to Madleen. No witnesses, no forensic matches, and no confessions. The suspect designation appeared to many as a convenient narrative shift, redirecting scrutiny away from the McCanns. This redirection prompted key questions. Was Bruckner merely a distraction? Had investigators, facing immense public pressure and dwindling leads, turned to a known criminal to breathe life into a fading case. To critics, it felt orchestrated, a scapegoat theory convenient for authorities and the McCanns alike. Several hypotheses have been suggested. Political shielding. As a professional couple with media access and social capital, the McCanns may have received political protection. Gordon Brown's early involvement could have influenced the Portuguese investigation, directly or indirectly. Narrative control. By partially cooperating, engaging media, and sustaining Madeleine's fund, the McCanns shaped the public conversation. Bruckner's emergence allowed a new chapter that steered focus elsewhere. Strategic silence. Kate's refusal to engage with investigators might reflect legal strategy, not guilt. But in the public eye, silence often reads as avoidance. Paired with Jerry's composed demeanor, it created an image of deflection rather than devastation. From a psychological standpoint, the legal saga has the texture of a chess match. Each move, from silence to press conferences to suspect redirection, appears carefully calculated. If innocent, the McCanns were victims twice, first of tragedy, then of global suspicion. But if complicit, the lifting of Arguto's status and the introduction of Bruckner might represent one of the most effective public deflections in modern criminal history. Emotionally, the oscillation between accusation and exoneration frustrates both public and legal closure. To many, Bruckner's spotlight feels like a cold case smokescreen, an illusion of progress, not a step toward truth. In the end, the legal journey of the Madeleine McCann case is marked not just by evidence and inquiry, but by perception, politics, and power. Whether the truth was buried under public pressure or lost in procedural missteps remains a question as haunting as Madeleine's disappearance itself. The Madeleine McCann case didn't just unfold in courtrooms or on Portuguese streets. It exploded across digital platforms. Social media, particularly X and Reddit, became a battleground of competing narratives. While major outlets like Sky News and BBC World shared messages of support on Madeleine's birthday, "We will never give up," a growing segment of online users voiced deep distrust. Anti-McCann communities accused Kate and Jerry of negligence at best and cover-up at worst. Their criticism focused on unanswered questions, the decision to leave 3 toddlers alone, the immediate framing of abduction, the washing of Cuddle Cat, and the refusal to answer police questions. Programs like 48 Hours and online documentaries amplified this split, with some portraying the couple as grieving parents, others as calculated performers. Was this public division a reflection of truth-seeking or character assassination? Many observers noted how the McCanns leveraged media, launching Madeleine's fund, giving interviews, maintaining visibility. Critics argue this built a protective wall of sympathy. Supporters, however, viewed the same acts as a desperate attempt to stay relevant in the hunt for their child. From a psychological lens, their media presence served dual purposes, protecting image and controlling narrative. The public outrage, particularly online, was fueled by the need for accountability, a need that remained unmet. As years passed, hope turned into suspicion, compassion into skepticism. After nearly 2 decades, Madeleine McCann's disappearance remains one of the most haunting mysteries of our time. Despite forensic alerts, behavioral inconsistencies, and suspicious timelines, no definitive resolution has emerged. If the theory that Kate and Jerry accidentally caused their daughter's death holds, the story takes a chilling turn, from tragedy to deception. The open window, washed toy, media control, and delayed police calls form a mosaic of doubt. Kate's silence during interrogation and Jerry's polished media image cast long shadows over their presumed innocence. The introduction of Christian Bruckner as a suspect may have shifted pressure, but did little to close the case. Instead, it raised fears that the truth, whatever it may be, has been buried by politics, media spin, and time. The case leaves us with a bitter truth: parental decisions have consequences, and the line between protection and manipulation can be razor thin. If guilty, Kate and Jerry didn't just lose a daughter. They rewrote a narrative to shield themselves, turning Madeleine's name into a long-running performance. And so, the question lingers, on every street, in every headline, and in every quiet doubt. Where did Madleen go that night?